2 years ago, almost nobody could have imagined this image. Alabama, sitting behind several SEC rivals on the recruiting trail. For nearly 2 decades, the Crimson Tide didn't just win recruiting battles, they defined them. So what changed? Did Alabama suddenly lose its edge after Nick Saban? Or is there a much bigger story unfolding behind the scenes? Because if you only look at today's rankings, you may be missing the most important part of the story. For years, recruiting and Alabama were almost impossible to separate. Every recruiting cycle seemed to follow the same script. Elite prospects visited Tuscaloosa. 5-star players committed. National rankings placed Alabama near the very top. Then, a few years later, many of those same players were hearing their names called in the NFL draft. That cycle became one of the greatest competitive advantages college football had ever seen. But dynasties rarely end with a single moment. Most of the time, the first signs are subtle. A recruiting battle lost here, a commitment flipped there, a rival suddenly becoming much more competitive. At first, nobody pays much attention, until one day, everyone realizes the landscape no longer looks the same. That is exactly why this recruiting cycle has attracted so much attention. Programs like Texas, Texas A&M, LSU and Auburn have continued adding major commitments, while Alabama has started much more slowly than many expected. Recruiting services such as On3 Rivals and the composite rankings have reflected that slower start, creating a wave of discussion across college football. The immediate reaction has been obvious. People are calling it a recruiting crisis. But is that really what's happening? Or are we watching something much more complicated because recruiting rankings can tell one story, while roster strategy tells another? And that distinction may explain why opinions around Alabama are so divided. One side argues that the Crimson Tide simply isn't winning enough recruiting battles anymore. They point to highly rated prospects choosing conference rivals and to Alabama appearing lower than usual in national rankings. The other side believes those rankings don't tell the full story. They argue that Alabama is intentionally building a smaller class while focusing on roster retention and the transfer portal, 2 factors that have completely changed modern college football. If that's true, then today's rankings may look very different from the final signing class. But there is another detail that makes this story much more interesting. Kalen DeBoer himself has acknowledged that college football has changed dramatically. During public comments this offseason, he discussed the growing importance of NIL support and the increasingly competitive recruiting environment. Those comments immediately sparked debate among fans and analysts. Was he simply describing the new reality, or quietly sending a message that Alabama must adapt faster than many people realize? Nobody outside the program knows for sure, and that's where the mystery begins. Because recruiting has never been only about stars next to a player's name. It has always been about relationships, timing, resources, and perception. Perception matters because elite recruits notice everything. They notice who is winning. They notice who is developing players. They notice coaching stability, and they notice momentum. Momentum may be the most powerful currency in recruiting. When one commitment happens, another often follows. When momentum slows, every recruiting battle becomes harder. That doesn't mean Alabama has lost its recruiting identity. Far from it. The Crimson Tide still possesses one of the strongest brands in college football. The facilities remain elite. The coaching staff continues evaluating top prospects across the country. And Alabama still sends players to the NFL at one of the highest rates in the sport. Those advantages haven't disappeared. But one advantage has clearly become smaller: the gap between Alabama and everyone else. Programs across the SEC have invested heavily in recruiting departments, NIL collectives, and player development. Texas A&M continues attracting elite talent. Texas has built enormous momentum. LSU has accelerated after a slower start. Auburn has become increasingly aggressive inside the state of Alabama. None of those programs are waiting for Alabama to adjust. They're forcing Alabama to respond. That may be the biggest difference between today and the Nick Saban era. Back then, Alabama often dictated the recruiting conversation. Today, the conversation is much more competitive, and perhaps that's healthy for college football. But it also creates enormous pressure inside Tuscaloosa. Because Alabama fans don't judge recruiting classes the same way most schools do, finishing near the top isn't considered a bonus. It's considered the expectation. Anything less immediately raises questions. Yet history also reminds us to be careful. Recruiting classes change dramatically before signing day. One successful weekend of official visits can completely reshape the rankings. One unexpected commitment can change the national conversation overnight. That's why experienced recruiting analysts often warn against judging a class too early. The final picture usually looks very different from the first headlines. So where does that leave Alabama? Some believe this is the first real warning sign of the post-Saban era. Others believe DeBoer is quietly building a roster designed for the realities of modern college football instead of the realities of a decade ago. Right now, there isn't enough evidence to fully prove either argument. And perhaps that's exactly what makes this story so fascinating, because the real question isn't whether Alabama sits lower in the rankings today. The real question is whether those rankings will still matter when signing day arrives. If Alabama finishes with another elite class, today's headlines will quickly be forgotten. But if this slower pace continues, people may eventually look back on this offseason as the moment the balance of power inside the SEC truly began to change. Only time will answer that question. Until then, every commitment, every visit, and every recruiting battle becomes another piece of a much larger puzzle. So what do you think? Is Alabama simply following a different recruiting strategy? Or are we watching the first real signs of a new era in college football? Leave your opinion in the comments. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to the channel and join us for the next deep dive into the biggest stories shaping Alabama football.